Good morning. I think we're getting ready to start in just a moment, so please take your seats. Well, welcome everyone to the Emergency Access Advisory Council on March 30th. We have a very long agenda to get through today, and that's outstanding. So first, I want to thank everyone for being willing to make time to come here. It's an exciting meeting. I know there's been a lot of exciting stuff going on this week leading up to our meeting today as well. We're going to start out with roll call, and Cheryl King, if you do the honors.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Richard. And Hillary, there's a name tag for you, and if you'd like to come up to the table, certainly you're welcome to. Okay. And Susan's just walking in the door. Cheryl King here. Again, please announce yourself when you speak. Do we have people on the bridge?
Yes, we do.
Great, thank you.
Yes, Cheryl.
All right, well then let me start with the bridge for our attendance. Bernard Aboba, Angel Arocho, Jim Coleman, Ronnie Cotton.
Here.
David Zumba may be joining us off and on during the day. Gunnar Hellstrom.
Yes, I'm here, but I will also be a bit on and off.
All right, thank you. Brad Hodges. Rebecca Ledoux. Marcy Roth. Neil McDivitt. Greg Schumacher. Greg Vanderheiden, who is in Europe and may join us later. Have I missed anyone else on the bridge?
This is Paul Michaelis. I'm on.
Oh, hi, Paul. Didn't know where you were going to be today. Anyone
Roger
else?
Roger Hickson from Neenah. Matt Gersh suggested I attend today.
Great. That's great.
Hi, Cheryl. Peter Musgrove, AT&T.
Hi, Peter. Anyone else?
Good morning, Cheryl. It's Lori Flaherty.
Good morning. Anyone else? Okay, if anyone else joins us, please announce yourself. In the room, we have Brian Daly, Patrick Donovan, Jean-Paul Emard, Sherry Farina, Mark Fletcher, Matt Gerst, Kevin Green, Brendan Casper, Marta Kinder, Cheryl King, Chris Littlewood, Hillary Martinson, Robert Mather, Donna Platt, Richard Ray, Susan Sherwood, Al Sonnenstraw. Karen Strauss will be in and out visiting us during the day. Mark Stern, Arnold Van Wyck, Christian Vogler, Norm Williams, and Joel Zev. Have I missed anyone in the room? Oh, I knew you were going to be here, Don Mitchell, and there you appear. Thank you. And Tony Dunn, yes, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Richard,
Great, thank you, Cheryl. And next thing on our agenda is the minutes from last month, from February 10th. Are there any corrections to the minutes from our last meeting? If none, can I hear a motion to accept the minutes as printed?
I move. Matt Gersh seconds.
Great, and we have a second. Any opposed? If we have none opposed, motion carries. Next item on our agenda is the exhibit of the text to 911 technology, and so we'll turn it over to Cheryl King again. The floor is yours.
Cheryl here. Wow. Wow.
Seconded.
Yes.
Seconded.
Wednesday, March 28th, and yesterday, March 29th, the EAC sponsored at the FCC's Technology Experience Center an exhibition fair of text to 911 solutions. We had 10 exhibitors, several member organizations from this committee members were among the 10. This morning I sent to each of you what I call a one-page cheat sheet that lists the 10 exhibitors, and there's a brief description of what their technology or product was. That was available. We were extremely fortunate to engage this exhibition fair at the time that Nina's 911 comes to Washington was here. We had a good contingent of Nina folks from all across the country that visited the technology fair, the exhibition fair. And there was one large contingent from Hawaii that came out of the room where the exhibits were, and they were kind of huddled in a group, and they said, "We got to do this at home." And I thought that was great. I handed them the one-sheeter, and they had the handouts from the vendors in the room. And so we got a lot of good feedback from the Nina folks. We had members of the EAC who came to town early, and they were able to come into the room and view the exhibition. We had folks from the FCC. We had many people who were interested from our Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, as well as other bureaus, came down to see what was up. And even though the room is a little small for the group that we had, people were still doing it. They were still going through the room and speaking with as many of the vendors as they could, and many conversations were taken out of the room to where it was a little cooler on Wednesday, and conversations abound. So it was a very, very great experience, and I thank you all for your help and support in making it happen. Is there anyone else who has some particular special observation or information that you may have learned or had confirmed or whatever from the exhibition that you would like to share? Or you want to dig right into the work? Okay.
This is Richard, and I see Al. Al is on the list here.
Do you have your hand up?
This is Al. Yes, I was on that line last month, and I disconnected and reconnected to establish a new username, and I couldn't get rid of that. So I understand. My hand is very tired from having been raised for over a month, but I do not actually have my hand up online. This is a glitch. Richard. Okay, great. Thank you. And any other comments or observations?
Matt Gerst, CTIA. I just want to say thank you to Cheryl and the Commission for putting on the exhibition. I think between the tech fair this past week and the visit to the Fairfax County PSEP, those have been the two most informative days we've had throughout this process. So thank you again, and I certainly learned a lot too.
Thank you.
This is Richard. And I would like for us to take a moment to applaud the FCC's efforts. If we give them a round of applause. Thank you. Great. Any other comments? Yes, I see a hand. Sherry? Hi, good morning, everyone. I also want to extend my thanks to Cheryl King for all of her hard work putting together the exhibit. It was fantastic, and it's a very, very exciting thing to see all of the possible solutions showcased and to see no excuses because there are solutions available. So there are a lot of thoughts, and I have them written down. I've scribbled a lot of notes, so I'd like to make some recommendations. I move that the FCC adopt the following recommendations. That any interim solution for text to 911 specifically be SMS with 3-digit number 911. This is Richard. Do we have a second? I see a second from Donna Platt. And any discussion on that motion?
Yeah, this is Roger Hickson from NENA. Let me point out that the 10 solutions that were there at the Tech Fair are 10 of a number of solutions, all of which weren't displayed, if you will, based on past committee work I've been involved in.
Matt and Brian.
And Brian?
Yes, thank you. Not to comment directly on the proposed motion on the floor, but I again would like to thank Cheryl for the fair, which was very informative. What I would like to do is propose a slight amendment to the motion on the floor. We do have the interim text to 911 working group that Greg Vanderheiden and I are leading. I would like to propose that motion be remanded to that working group as one of the principles that we address as we complete the recommendations out of that working group. Thank you.
This is Roger Hickson. I definitely support that.
Okay, Mark?
Mark Fletcher from Avaya. I also support Sherry in the spirit of what you're saying, but I would warn against limiting it to just SMS and defer to the group because there are other things such as real-time text that should be made applicable. And the motion as it stands, I would be a little concerned that it's very limited to just SMS technology. So I agree with the spirit of what you're saying, but I think, as Brian said, we need to expand and modify that a bit.
Kevin.
Sorry, Kevin. I was having a hard time seeing your name placard. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. Kevin Green, Verizon. I would support the motion as amended by Brian. I think it would need additional study as well.
John Paul.
John Paul?
Jean-Paul Imard from Addis. I would also agree with the remand because it seems that Subcommittee 1 is the largest active committee I think that we're going to see relative to the working groups that we have. And I think given the fact that we have over 28 individuals, I think we had 34 on our very first call, it would be putting the cart before the horse, I think. So I would just, while I agree with the idea, but I think it should be remanded to our group. Thank you.
I would suggest, hold on, we have to, just 1 second, Norm. We're waiting until we get you on the screen. There we go. This is Norm. I would suggest that we modify Sherry's motion a little bit, that we add the word minimum at a minimum so that SMS will be supported, but the addition of other protocols is not necessarily precluded. And Mark, I second Norm's statement. Great. So there was a second to Norm's motion. So any discussion on that specific point? Sherry? I support Norm's amendment because we have to start with a strong foundation. We can't afford to waste time. Every second counts. And I don't necessarily see that reflected in the recent amendment to remand it to the subcommittee. We have to start with a strong foundation.
I would second that. I think we should make this recommendation as close to...
Just a minute, Chris. I don't think your mic's on. Chris Littlewood?
This is Chris Littlewood, CPSI, National Terrorism Preparedness Institute. I would second what Sherry said, and I would suggest that we make the recommendation as close to her original proposal and that we make modifications and additions thereafter. Like she said, time is of the essence, so I would agree with her statement.
And Matthew Gerst, comment?
Matt Gerst, CTIA. So, point of order. I think after Chris's suggestion, we now have 4 motions on the table. Are we going to be voting on each of these sub-specific motions, or are we just continuing to amend the original motion? I think we probably should be voting on each one, because each one seems to be a different amendment to the original. Unless there's another procedure that we're supposed to be following. I'm not totally clear what the process is.
This is Richard. The first motion was made, and then Norm has amended that motion, but I think that we have been discussing ideas but haven't had any formal amendments other than Norm's proposed amendment, formal amendment. First, we had the original motion from Sherry, and now Norm has proposed an amendment to that. We were all just kind of brainstorming ideas, my understanding in the discussion, but if there are other amendments, I'm not aware of them. I think there's just a single amendment on the floor. Matt?
This is Matt Gross, CTIA. I believe Brian Daly also had a motion procedural move for the original motion. So I think there's at least 3, and then if you add Chris's suggestion of adding language for, I believe, Chris, you said additional solutions as needed. Or, I'm sorry, I didn't quite get your phrase, but maybe Chris had some other language that he would like to see added in, so that could be 4.
This is Chris Littlewood again. I didn't have additional language that I wanted to add to it. I just wanted to say that I think the original statement is a good starting point now, and modifications and changes can happen afterwards. Turning over it to the work group now categorically means that we're going to wait, and I'm not necessarily in favor of that. And I would rather we make a recommendation to move forward earlier rather than later.
This is Richard. So I have Norm's amendment. We could examine that amendment as it stands, and then we can move to, we had Brian's and then Sherry. So let me see.
Yeah, excuse me. This is Paul
Sherry
Michaelis.
wanted to point out that there was no second on.
Is someone on the bridge trying to get in?
Yeah, this is Paul Michaelis. I've had my hand up for a while.
Oh, Paul Michaelis, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, with regard to the proposal that SMS be a FCC recommendation, I'm very worried about the potential wording of the recommendation. I want to make sure that people recognize that real-time text is essential. I don't want people to assume that a recommendation along the lines of SMS implies that real-time text is not something we have to work toward. Again, I'm very worried that people would interpret a recommendation for SMS to mean that it is adequate and that real-time text is not essential.
This is Cheryl. I'd like to clarify where we are and what we're doing. Sherry moved that the FCC adopt the following recommendation, that any interim solution for text to 911 specifically be SMS with the 3-digit short code. And then Brian Daly, you amended to remand? Yes, Brian?
Yeah, my suggestion was, since we do have the working group responsible for looking at interim text to 911 pre-NG, that we take that and remand it to the working group as one of the principles that the working group addressed.
Okay, and that was a proposed amendment to Sherry's motion, and Kevin seconded it?
It was more of a proposed disposition of the motion.
Okay, then we could address that after the motion moves or fails. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then Norm asked to amend the Sherry's motion to include at a minimum SMS. And Mark seconded it? Mark Stern? Okay. And then Chris Littlewood additional solutions as needed. Is that correct? Chris, did you intend to amend Sherry's motion with that, or just you were in discussion?
I agree more with the original.
Okay, so you don't have a specific thing there. Okay. So is everybody clear on the procedure? All right, discussion. Joel?
Yes, Joe. Yes. No, not there yet. Hello? Are we there yet? Okay, good. Just a couple comments. I'm very much in favor of setting some goals, but I agree with Brian that it may be just a little bit premature. We talked about how we handle things in doing our recommendations to the FCC in December, and it turned out we all reached some consensus that no one really followed, and there were still very divergent opinions on that as per post-recommendation comments. I think we have to think of short-term solutions, and I think we have a subcommittee approaching that, and we also think of long-term solutions. And we had our blue sky thing last spring, but I think there are things which were not shown yesterday because they haven't been thought of yet. And I hate to see us limiting ourselves in long-term solutions by any mandate yet because it's not there. But short-term, absolutely, we need to do something. But I think we have a really fine committee organized, and I think we have to vet this out and discuss it and come up with other ways of handling it and see what's best. I would hate to see us limit the discussion of the committee before the committee has its second meeting.
Cheryl here. as part of the discussion, it seems that the subcommittee's work is to prepare a recommendation to the FCC. I would like to explore whether or not, Sherry, you could amend your motion to, instead of moved that the FCC adopt, that you could move that the EAAC working group explore how, I'm struggling for words here, explore developing a recommendation that includes at a minimum SMS, and then further with your language, Sherry? Rather than move right now to recommend to the FCC, because that really is the work of the working group, but we could give full committee guidance to the working group. Go ahead, Sherry.
Well, first of all, I think it's funny that there are people who have access to 911 who are making comments and controlling the bent of the discussion here. I think that just needs to be said very clearly. It feels discriminatory, and it's kind of disgusts me. But to modify my motion here, I feel that the subcommittee should understand very clearly the need for a strong position to work from, and that the goal is to put together a strong foundation rather than listening to industry and the rest of the companies who are trying to delay this from moving forward. I do think that it needs to be said that we need a foundation to build on, and I feel that that's very clear in the motion. I don't necessarily understand why we have to compromise on our access to 911. Christian? Hello. This is Christian here. I have two comments. First of all, I strongly agree that it's time to move forward with an interim solution for access to 911 services. Because, I mean, for example, if we think about the amount of the TRS fund, we're seeing that the use of TTY is completely going downhill based on the statistics that we're getting from the TRS fund, and which is then compromising people's access to 911 services. My second comment is in response to some of the concerns that are stated that an interim solution will then interfere with a long-term solution development. My answer to that is no. We certainly understand the concern, but we've spent a long time thinking about how to make an interim solution available, and we'll have a long-term solution come with NG 911. Our point of view is that there are many ways to make this work. And as an example, one of our options is having PSAP support real-time text. In that event, you can merge the SMS and real-time text systems. It is technically feasible. So we can put together innovative solutions, and those can be rolled into the NG 911 plan. I feel that they aren't mutually exclusive.
Mark?
Thanks, Cheryl. I agree completely. What I want to make sure that everyone understands, especially Sherry, I think everyone is in agreement that we need to move forward immediately. But we need to make sure that we don't designate a single technology as being the only solution short term. And I think everyone is in agreement with your original motion. However, you just stated SMS. And if we simply add and other technologies as appropriate, I would fully support your motion because that does not limit the framework. It solves the short-term and long-term evolution.
Al?
Al?
Perhaps you may not realize what is out there now. Currently, each PSAP already have TTYs. They're already in place. And based on what we've seen in the last 2 days, it's just technology available that can work using SMS to every PSAP's TTY through the gateway. That is already there and available now. And the cost is minimal. Why should we wait then? Did you know that the SMS people, including deaf people, do have a right to get heart attacks? Just as hearing people do. And what if we get a heart attack and that technology is not available? Why should we have to wait? Just start off with a minimum standard. And that is something that is available now. And then we can work on a long-term solution. So why should we wait? That's the purpose of the motion. Thank you. Richard Ray speaking. Matt?
Matt Gerst?
All right. Matt Gerst, CTIA. So I want to first say that, oh, Sherry's listening. I'll wait. Thanks. From CTI's perspective, we completely agree with the urgency of the need to find an interim solution for text-based communications to 911. I want to state that clearly for the record. I also would like to state that the industry is not opposed to any particular solution. In fact, the industry would favor any solution that would provide text-based communications to 911. We have two caveats to that. One is that the solution meets the public's expectations for an emergency communication service. And the other is that it also meets with our expected regulatory and policy requirements that the industry is already required to comply with. So long as we can address those two issues, and I think that's what the subcommittee was set up to do, to discuss those particular issues, I believe we can find a solution. But we need to discuss these very difficult questions in the subcommittee. Thanks.
This is Richard. Donna?
Donna Platt?
I've been here all week. I attended the NINA and the 911 affairs group, and I've been hearing a great deal of discussion about the technology, the Virginia technology, the Virginia Tech shooting, rather, and how people were hiding and trying to text to 911. And I think there were about 200 text calls that were made, but there were no responses. 200 within one shooting. And when I think about the time that has passed since then, it doesn't seem as if anything has been done. And why is it? Why are we waiting? What are we waiting for? What is the delay? And it's time that we need to stop waiting. As I've met with other people in the last 2 days, Congress people, and most of them are shocked to hear that there is no text to 911 availability. And so again, their question echoes ours. Why wait? We had an exhibit fair for the last 2 days, and I echo my thanks to Cheryl King for arranging that. Well, we saw many different vendors. Wow. The possibilities are there. There's so many different possibilities. And they're different, covering different parts of the country. And I think that is phenomenal. So again, the question is, why wait when the technology is there? There was one more thing that came up last week. I happened to be talking with a friend, a person who is deaf and blind in Seattle. And, there's a large population of people who are deaf and blind in Seattle. And there was a concern there, which is related to the number of TTY machines that also present Braille, that the manufacturing they're not manufacturing as many TTYs that also include Braille. So it is an issue not only within the state, but also with other states. When you look at programs and telecommunication devices and telecommunication distribution programs, when you look at these programs and devices, you look at that the number that if we look at the number of telecommunicators with Braille, when they look at the population of people who are deaf and blind and their access to 911, they wanted me to include their remarks on behalf of the deaf and blind community. I don't know how to answer them because they have no other options. So, in some ways, we can say, yes, we get it, we understand it, the text to 911, or some of the larger issues involving Braille and text. But I think that's something else that we need to think about as we go on. So, and that's something that we also need to focus on. Richard. Thank you, Donna. Karen?
Thanks, Donna. And I'm sorry that I arrived late, everyone. I want to just respond to what you just said, Donna, and just remind everybody that the beginning July, hopefully in July, it will be sometime around July, but we're shooting for July, our National Deafblind Equipment Distribution Program will go into effect, which is implementation of another section in the CVAA, which will provide money to the states, to state programs, state certified programs, that will allow them to give out equipment to deafblind people who are low income. It will close some of that gap, hopefully. What we're hoping is that the very, very expensive cost of Braille-enabled TTY equipment will go down with greater numbers. It's still not a large population, and that's one of the reasons that equipment is so expensive. But we are hoping to get more equipment into the hands of people who are deafblind. And I was really heartened to see at the exhibit to the exhibition fair, Gallaudet's demo of enabling backward compatible TTYs to be able to still use 911 via text. So I think you're right. I think there are solutions. And I apologize for being late. I'm sorry that I missed the accolades, and I want to personally give kudos to Cheryl I know that you must have done this already, but I don't know whether she mentioned to you that people here have considered this amongst the best exhibition ever to have taken place in our Technology Experience Center. And so I don't know if she mentioned that, but hands waving for Cheryl, because yes. It was really, and to all of you that participated, it was really, truly extraordinary. And I know that I spent a lot of time down there myself and could have even spent more. It was really, truly amazing. But anyway, I just wanted to respond to your deafblind issue.
This is Cheryl again. Thank you all. And again, the Gallaudet Rec, RERC, Entrado, we had telecommunication systems, we had New Star, Entrado, a couple of new vendors that I'd never heard of before, Fresh Foundation, a lot of the folks around the tables, organizations were there, and some new ones, and so thank you all to that. It was really quite an experience. I have an alternate language for Sherry's motion to see if I've captured the discussion here. EAC supports, as an interim solution for text to 911, at a minimum, a 3-digit short code, 911, comma, SMS and other technologies as appropriate. Donna, you're shaking your head. What do we need to fix?
Sherry.
Okay.
Sherry, no, I'm nodding.
Okay.
This is Donna here. This is Donna here. My understanding of Sherry's motion and Norm's comment was a minimum of SMS using a 3-digit code.
Oh, okay.
911.
Okay, we need to move it around a little bit. Okay. Norm?
Norm? Norm speaking. I'm not sure exactly what terminology should be added, but should start with SMS currently, and then add other technologies as appropriate. Because if we do not mention that, it means that we would both have to wait for that decision to be made. There's SMS now, and then continue working on other solutions as appropriate.
Okay.
Sherry, I'm okay with that.
Okay, this is Cheryl. Jean-Paul?
This is Jean-Paul from Addis. I guess I have a question of clarification to make sure that I understand that based on what we are discussing here, is that the PSAPs would be able to accept SMS-based text in some format, but it's my understanding that currently there have been no field tests or field trials to ensure that SMS text to even TTY machines would actually work in critical situations, for instance. Not just on a one-to-one basis, not a single heart attack, but maybe the Virginia Tech shootings, by the way, which are very close to my heart because my son went there. So I'm very familiar with the fact that, yes, we need this and we need this as soon as possible, but I want to make sure that it works and it is not just some hope that it works.
Tony?
I appreciate that concern, but I just wanted to mention that Intrado has field tested. We have 2 deployments currently. One has been in use for 2 years, and there has been another test that's currently in Raleigh-Durham, and they are still in the testing process, in the testing phase. But also our company has conducted some extensive testing in terms of reliability and making sure that the system out there is what it needs to be for emergency communications.
Brian Daly?
Yes, thank you, Cheryl and Richard. I would like to also propose that we just expand on the proposed motion on the floor. I think it captures the essence of what the need is, and fully support the need for a text to 911. But I think from our perspective, we would also suggest we add in that it's a standards-based, vendor-neutral solution that takes into account the end-to-end service from the device to the PSAP. Because when you talk about SMS to 911, it's the ability to originate the SMS message, transport the SMS message, and deliver it ultimately to the PSAP in one form or another, whether it be direct SMS or TTY or some format. But I think we do need a standards-based, vendor-neutral solution as well. Thank you.
Richard here. Sherry?
Sherry Farina?
I'm trying to put together all the different comments that have been expressed. And I think there's nothing wrong with starting out with SMS and adding other possible future advances, but starting from the basic premise, starting point, that we're working on identifying whether it be a short-term solution or which can be a longer-term solution. That in the short term, SMS, in the long term, RTT. Something like that. But I'm just saying that companies, the various companies, when they've shown what they can do, like Entrado has said that, Tony, thank you. I'm so bad with names. Tony, your comment about testing 35,000 different text places around the U.S. and something like that, is so in depth, is so detailed, that can be gotten into later. But I would like to see us move on into the market.
This is Cheryl. All right, so let's wrap up. Cheryl King. Let's see if we can take care of the motion and we can move on with the agenda. So procedurally, Sherry, if you accepted my changes, the EAC supports as an interim solution for text to 911, at a minimum SMS and other technologies as appropriate, with a 3-digit short code 911. Then, when we get to your working group discussion later today, would you propose your suggested action that to propose that the EAC supports standard-based vendor-neutral solution? Okay. Then does that take care of everybody's amendments?
Cheryl, Norm speaking. I would like to add a word. I would like to mention that starting with SMS, so that we don't have to wait for both having to happen at the same time. That we're starting with SMS first, and then we're working on other solutions as appropriate. Because I don't want to put together, I don't want them to think, I don't want it to be thought that it has to happen at the same time. That I want to make it clear that we're starting with SMS now.
Cheryl here. I'm sorry. We heard at NINA, Norm, someone qualified the interim solution of text to 911 as a version 1.0, something that would be a base for moving to NG 911, because sometimes people get hung up on the term short term and interim, and I know even the subcommittees last year struggled with how to capture that concept, and so in saying at a minimum SMS and other technologies as appropriate, with a 3-digit short code. If we say at a minimum SMS and other appropriate and other technologies, does that address your concern, Norm? At a minimum SMS.
Norm speaking. If there's other technology that is available that's not being discussed, I would not want it to hold up the SMS, because that's what other technology would have to be reviewed as well. And I'm afraid that if that would happen, that would delay progress further. But once SMS was released and then focus on whatever technologies there are, I think it would be quicker to provide the service if we're looking at both at the same time, rather than just delaying the service Alison and Strauss speaking. Or how about adding, starting out with SMS as version 1.0 and others?
Cheryl here. And my only concern about that is that there are regional and geographically condensed areas that have PSAPs that are moving to NG911, and that may not include SMS. Their NG911 might be real-time text. And so it sounds like we're suggesting is you have to do SMS first and then move on. But we've learned over the last 3 days that there are places who are moving right into NG911, and they may not go to SMS at all.
Norm speaking. I think that I would like to recommend now that we talk about the user side, the network, and not the NG911. I'm talking about the user point of view. So that if we would add the statement for users' experiences with SMS, it can arrive, it can get to the center as in another format, but we're talking about the user's use of SMS and the user's experience. Where can we put that in? Because we're not talking about the network, we're not talking about the PSAP center, we're focusing on the user. Christian
Vogler.
Christian Vogler. I would like to add to your point as well that there are some PSAPs who have done a wonderful job enhancing their equipment so that technology is about to be available. But we also have to remember that consumers also need to have the same kinds of experience all over the country. So that something may be available here and supports SMS, but they travel to another part of the country, that area might not support SMS. But they support RTT. So we need consistency. So we're talking about general expectations for everyone's use, for all users. So we're looking at minimum requirements that would be available everywhere. John Paul?
You make a very good point, Christian, and I think that's why when we're all said and done, we really need a standards-based, vendor-neutral solution in order for any user going from any place in the country to be able to be assured that wherever they are, when they make their text to 911, that they are received within the PSAP in which they're in. Because obviously, not all PSAPs are going to be ready, even with an SMS-based solution, I don't think. That's going to have to be tested, and I still am somewhat concerned that those tests have not been significant enough. So, again, the expectation is going to be there and not fulfilled.
Yes, Karen.
I think, though, that if I understand correctly, what you're trying to do here is you're not saying that this is going to be done tomorrow. What you're saying is, as a committee, this is something that you want. So, am I right? I mean, you're not saying that that the FCC should go out and tomorrow issue rules requiring this of every. Well, let me back up. I don't want to say that. I'm taking that back. Can you repeat the motion?
Cheryl here. The EAC supports as an interim solution for text to 911 at a minimum SMS and other technologies as appropriate with a 3-digit short code 911.
I guess what I see is that is a statement designed to achieve a goal that I thought that this whole EAC already agreed to. And so what I'm not understanding is, we saw the past couple of days that there are technologies that can achieve this. We can't require anything that's not technologically feasible. if it is feasible, going under the assumption that this is feasible, I guess the question is, does this committee want to put forward a motion that this be accomplished? Phrasing it like that. Assuming that this, maybe you want to add that, assuming that this is technologically feasible, is this something that this committee can support? That's what you've been asked to do under the CVAA, to come up with recommendations to us. So what you're saying is, well, it's not feasible, so let's not agree to this. But what I'm saying is, if it's feasible, if you can assume that it's feasible, and regardless of how you come out on the standards-based or vendor or neutral language, is it something that you can support? And I guess I want to just throw out something else to that, and that's that in addition to it being standards-based and vendor neutral, you may want to think about the extent to which it needs to be transparent to the user, because that's the other thing, that's the other component that we're hearing, that the user doesn't have to know what's going on in the pipeline. They just have to know that if they do something at their end user experience, it's going to reach a 911 PSAP. So that's the way I guess I would frame the question.
Matt?
Matt Gurr, CTIA. So Karen and others on the committee, I just would like to address your suggestions here. I think the discussion we're having here today is the exact discussion that we are supposed to be having. But I thought we were supposed to be having that at the subcommittee level, and I thought that's why the subcommittee for pre-NG 911 text-based communications to 911 was established. So I think some of the concern that you're hearing is that this adoption of a recommendation from the EAC may predetermine where that subcommittee ultimately ends up. And so I think the solution here, as was previously suggested in a second motion to follow up the original motion, was that we take this language and adopt it, but recommend it to the subcommittee to study and not for the full EAC to vote on today.
And I leave that to you to decide.
Right, and I think that's what hasn't been determined. I think we've spent a lot of time talking about what the recommendation should be, which I believe was the precise reason for establishing the subcommittee.
This is Cheryl, and responding to your comments, Matt. I have assumed and moved forward in this agenda in doing making a statement of the EAC to the subcommittee that the full EAC is telling the subcommittee, and there are other subcommittees. There's interoperability, there's timeline, there's the TTY transition, and several other subcommittees that can impact the same technology adoption. So as a recommendation from the full committee to the subcommittee or subcommittees, the modified statement of Sherry's motion that EAC supports as an interim solution for text to 911 at a minimum SMS, comma, and other technologies as appropriate, comma, with a 3-digit short code 911. And Sherry, you accept that as a substitute amendment or a substitute proposal from your original? Want me to read it again? Sherry?
Yes, the original motion has to do with asking the FCC to adopt the recommendation for text to 911 solution.
as an interim solution with a 3-digit numbering code. And I want to add that, other technologies, however that phrasing happens, but the point being that SMS, we have to have a goal established. We don't want it to be loosely defined by the subcommittee so that there's really no concrete endpoint, that we're not working towards something in particular. I think if we just leave it to the subcommittee, that we're spinning our wheels because we're not making progress. The people on the subcommittee, to be quite frank, are industry folks. So I don't even think, in my opinion, that that's a fair process. And I think it requires the attention of the full EAAC to establish a real concrete goal. And I move that we close discussion on this point.
Okay. All right. Cheryl here, Richard's asked me to read it again, and let's make sure we're procedurally correct about the discussion. All right. EAC supports as an interim solution for text to 911 at a minimum SMS, and other technologies as appropriate with a 3-digit short code 911.
This is Richard. Who's in favor of the amendment? I'm sorry, the motion as presented?
Okay, we could if you, procedurally, that's an amendment to Sherry's. She has accepted it. Do we need a second? Second? All right.
Says Ally second.
And with that substitute, we have superseded the amendments to the original motion. So we can vote on this motion. Jean Paul?
Could you read it one more time, please?
Sure. The EAC supports as an interim solution for text to 911 at a minimum SMS, and other technologies as appropriate, with a 3-digit short code 911.
This is Al saying I second.
Okay, Al seconding it. Jean-Paul?
Yeah, this is Jean-Paul speaking. So as a point of clarification, this is going to be, there's no intent, and there's certainly no direct language that this would be sent to Subcommittee 1. Is that correct?
Well, Cheryl here. If the EAC adopts this as a principle, then
you're adopting it as a recommendation.
Well, the language was EAC supports.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And all of the subcommittees can take guidance from it, frankly. All right. Is there any further discussion? All right. All those in favor, please raise your table tent. Put up your table tent. Yeah. All those in favor, voting aye, raise your table tent.
Online, do you want us to raise our hand?
Okay. Is there a question from the bridge?
Yes, we don't have a table tip, so do you want to raise our hand if we're online?
Yes, we'll ask for your vote online in just a moment. Okay. Who's that? Greg Vander. Greg Vanderheiden, do you have a comment? Your hand was raised?
No, I was just raising my hand in favor.
Okay. All right. Does everybody? Oh, he does. Yeah. Right. Arnold?
Christian is an alternate,
Uh-huh.
so he's not voting right now?
You're not voting? Oh.
Just to clarify,
Yes.
this is Norm speaking.
Thank you. All right. All right.
Point of order.
Yes?
Would it be possible to take a break and have a few minutes to consider the language that was adopted, or at least move on to some other agenda items? Is there a reason we have to vote on this at this second? It would be helpful if we could have some time.
We have certainly, Cheryl here, we've certainly diverted from the agenda, and we're almost ready for lunch.
Then I move that we break for lunch and come back and vote.
I don't think we can have a motion on the middle of a motion.
I'm not quite sure where we are in the procedural rules at this point, so.
Right. Yeah, we're at a vote. Yeah.
This is Sherry. According to Robert's Rules of Order, if we're in the middle of a vote, we cannot break.
Right. Wait. Did you count? Did you count the table tens when they were up? All right. All in favor, raise your hand if you're in the room.
This is all in favor of
what?
If you're in favor of the proposal, the motion that EAC supports as an interim solution for text to 911 at a minimum SMS and other technologies as appropriate with a 3-digit short code 911. All right, and on the bridge, would you please state your name if you vote in favor?
Paul Michaelis, yes.
Greg Vanderheiden, yes.
Ronnie Cotton, yes.
Any others?
Lori Flaherty, yes.
All right. Thank you. And those opposed or abstaining? Those abstaining, raise your hand. On the bridge, if you are abstaining. What? Okay, you may lower your table tents. This is Cheryl. Yes?
Did you call for opposed?
They abstained, okay. All right. Okay. If you are an alternate and your principal is in the room, please do not vote. Okay.
Cheryl, I was talking to Paul.
Oh, yes, okay.
I want you to count both, please.
All right. Then I have a vote of 15 ayes, 6 abstentions, and no votes against. All right. Thank you, EAC. This has been a good, hard time. Subcommittee number 7, Kevin Green and Don Mitchell. Can we just get an update from one subcommittee before lunch?
Sure.
All right. Oh, excuse me. Christian?
Yeah.
Christian?
I just want to respond to one minor point that Matt made. I think we need to stress again that it's very important that you realize that working in the subcommittees through conference call is very, very frustrating for the deaf members of the committee. It's extremely difficult, and I would say that
Is everybody ready?
Okay. Now, before we get into our working group reports, I want to thank Matt Gerst from CTIA for providing a delicious breakfast and lunch today. So thank you on behalf of everyone. It was delectable. Okay, and now we can move towards our working group reports. So subcommittee 3, this is the PSAP and sign language and other communication assistance. So that's Donna and Chris.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Richard. This is Chris Littlewood. I'm going to let Donna give the full report, but we've been meeting.
I'm sorry, can we
basically through
just 1 second? I'm sorry. Okay. Are we okay? Christian saying they can't see the captions on the web page. Captions on the web are not working.
Oh.
Says Richard, you need to activate your FCC hotspot here. The FCC hotspot. Christian, well, the internet is working, but this web page is not displaying. Richard, well, I'm able to read it on my computer over here.
Out over lunch.
Christian, the internet's fine. It's just that the captions on the web page are not working right now.
Well, but they're working for him. So you may have been kicked off during lunch. So you need to go back in.
Jerry,
go back in.
I was kicked off.
Yeah, it times out after a while and you have to come back in. Start over from your browser.
This is Norm. The web page works fine. I mean, I'm able to go to other sites like CNN and whatnot, but when I log in, I'm always looping back to my login screen here, so I'm not able to.
You got it now? Okay. Are we ready on the bridge? And everybody say yay.
Yeah, we're here.
Okay.
This is Paul. I'm ready.
Okay.
Okay, let's try this again. So, Chris Littlewood, take it away.
Thank you. We'll try again. This is Chris Littlewood, and I'm going to let Donna give the full report. We've been working mostly through email communication with our group and starting to establish the purpose of our group, which is to develop guidelines and recommendations for future sign language and other communication line assistance through PSAPs. We're still updating and starting to create the original outline and just maybe some clarifications on our full objectives. And I'll let Donna talk a little bit more about what that is.
Thank you. This is Donna speaking. As Chris said, we have started out with email correspondence first, and we are still trying to set up our outline that will help make sure that we have consensus among the group. Once we do have agreement on that, then we are going to flesh out each of those areas and divide up those responsibilities. We haven't done that. We're hoping to set up a phone call perhaps later, but at this time, email seems to be the best way for us to handle it. Now, some of our members have some confusion about what the objectives of our working group are. We are not looking at what's available now. We're looking at after NG911 comes online and what we want to have in that system. So Chris and I had some discussions today to make sure we were clear with that before we move forward with our work. This is Richard. Anyone have any questions for Donna and Chris? Christian?
Christian Vogler?
This is Christian. Okay, thank you. I have a question. There's one thing that I have been concerned about, and I want to make sure I get some clarification on. In the EAC recommendation, we have promised to follow up on a number of issues about sign language assistance, which is great. But if I remember correctly, I was looking for the details but wasn't able to locate them. But we also mentioned that for the short term, the transition into NG911 and to full sign language assistance, we promised to investigate what's going on and what's wrong with the relay services and why the services are typically having a delay connecting to 911. So I haven't seen that addressed in any of the working group comments as of yet. Donna? That's my understanding from last fall and winter, was that we would have a separate center rather than VRS, but a central area that has more specific training for their operators and their interpreters. They're not only the interpreters, but also for speech-to-speech operators and any captioners. My understanding was that we were looking into having a separate system. Now, for VRS and IP relay and so forth, at the moment, yes, currently there are issues at play there. I know that the NENA Accessibility Committee has a working group that, which is called the VRS IP Relay PSAP Interaction Working Group, and there's a white paper that we published. So we have a list of the various issues and recommendations that's being worked on now. That is separate from what we are doing, but that's my understanding, is that it's entirely separate. So unless I've misunderstood the goal of our working group.
This is Cheryl. No, you're exactly right, Donna. And responding to Christian's raising of the issues about the relay, we had a number of recommendations that involved some sort of TRS, some sort of relay. I have pulled all of those recommendations out and sent them to Greg Leibach and his staff, my coworkers in DRO, who are working on TRS issues, and they will be coming back to us with, what ones they have in the pipeline, the issues that are in the pipeline, and then we can look at the ones that are not in the pipeline. And it's my expectation that after I get that feedback, then I'll bring that back to the full group. And if we want to or need to, empower another working group to move further on that, perhaps the FCC will tell us they need more guidance or more examples or whatever, then we can set up a working group at that time. Christian, does that seem to cover what your concerns are?
Yes, partially. What I'm looking for in those recommendations, when I find them, I'll let you know if those do address my concerns. So thank you.
Well, Christian, Cheryl again. When I get back to my office, I'll find the sheet that I sent to them, and I'll send it to you so that you don't have to double the work that's already been done. Okay.
And Donna? Also, Christian, I wanted to mention to you, I will also be in touch with you about the documents that we have from the NENA Accessibility Working Group, and I really appreciate any feedback that you have on those documents. Thank you. So, Richard, okay, any further questions for Chris and Donna at this time before we move forward with our next working group, which is number 2? Seeing no further questions. Okay, then Mark.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Mark Fletcher with Avaya. So myself with Al Sunnerstraw, my co-chair, the group established our listserv. Thanks to Greg for doing that. And we've got our recommendations. Our group has 13 specific recommendations. And one of our first tasks is going to be to prioritize and go through that list to weed out any duplicates or to shrink that down into a more manageable number. We also established a mission statement for the group, and that is the mission statement of the EAAC Interoperability Subcommittee is to ensure end-to-end interoperability between existing devices and common technology in use today and provide a smooth transition into next-generation multimedia services for people with disabilities. As part of the product testing, the end-to-end usability will be evaluated by the intended target user community, and existing definitions will be examined to ensure that they meet this subcommittee's expectations. So our group is just starting. We're going to be holding initially some email exchanges to put these recommendations into categories, and then we'll continue on with conference calls. So, Al, do you have anything to add?
This is Al. No, I think you've covered everything.
Okay, great. Thank you.
This is Richard. Any questions for either Al or Mark? Seeing none, we can move on to subcommittee number 1, which is pre-NG 911 solutions. So this would be Greg and Brian. Mobile text to 911 solutions. Brian?
Yes. Hello. This is Brian Daly. I believe Greg is on the line. I'll give an introduction first and see if Greg would like to add any beyond that. The Subcommittee 1 has established an email list. We did also have one web meeting conference call to discuss what Greg had initially started as common ground principles for the pre-NG 911 mobile text to 911 solution. And our first task is to go through these common ground principles and come up with a set that we believe are easy to come to consensus, and then delve deeper into some of the other more detailed topics once that common ground is understood. Now, given the discussion from this morning and the agreement that was reached, I think that definitely will need to be factored into those common ground principles. And also, I think we need to take a step back and see how that does impact the working group and going forward, since we have this direction from the EAAC at present for the pre-NG 911 mobile text to 911 solution. So that will have to be taken into account at this point. We do have a next conference call web meeting set up for next Wednesday. And we will schedule regular calls, and also to Christian's point earlier, we will also explore how to better engage the group, since we do have quite a large number of individuals represented on our subcommittee because of the interest in this topic. Greg, let me pass it to you to see if you have anything to add if you're on the call.
Yep. That was a good summary. We got a good set of discussion going.
Excuse me, Greg. This is Cheryl. You're coming through
Yes?
all mushy. Can you do a better job with your microphone?
Let me try one thing, but part of the problem is I'm in Brussels and I'm on a bad internet connection in a hotel. So
Okay, well, it's improved a little bit, so go ahead.
I will try to speak slowly so it gets by the mush.
Thank you.
We had a good discussion about the common principles with lots of input from all the members. This has been compiled, but we now have the new principles today, so we will revise it to use that as a basis and move from there. And I believe, Brian, did you mention the face-to-face?
That is, this is Brian. That has not come up yet. I think Cheryl, I had asked you what Cheryl and I had a discussion earlier, but we had not discussed that within the larger group yet.
Yeah. Just as a heads up, there's a preliminary discussion planning a possible face-to-face, which we will follow up with the full group, and but things seem to be moving along with good discussion and participation.
Brian?
That's it.
Thank you, Greg. Some additional questions and guidance that I believe we need for the subcommittee is timelines when the work should be completed, and also, as mentioned earlier, whether this discussion we had this morning and the agreement reached provides any new direction or any focus on what the output of the subcommittee should be, given a specific focus now that's been directed to us. So Cheryl or Richard, if maybe we can spend a few moments and talk about the timelines for this particular subcommittee, and when our work is anticipated or expected to be complete, and how that would factor in. We've heard, throughout the week during some of the other meetings that were held here, various discussions on timing of interim solutions, and in order to be effective, the subcommittee's work has to be in line with some of those expectations.
This is Cheryl. Yes, Brian, I fully understand that. And as the FCC works through its NG 911 NPRM proceeding, they will have an opportunity to be informed by the work of this advisory committee. God bless the federal government. I'm here to help you. There's no way to predict. So as quickly and as comprehensively as you can work, we know the issues that the FCC is looking at in that proceeding, and how best the subcommittee can inform the full EAC, and then the EAC can inform the FCC as they work through the issues. We know that they want to work as quickly as possible. And so, I can't tell you for sure, but they are working on it every day. Thinking here, this is March, tomorrow's Sunday's April already. And we did talk, I'll go into the face-to-face issue now. We were talking, Brian and I talked at the break, and it's what Greg and Brian were referring to. The second Friday of April is April 13th, I believe. And rather than have a full EAC meeting, if we could devote that to subcommittee efforts so that we could have that face-to-face, especially for the subcommittee number one, that is so large and so important, so that rather than have a full EAC meeting on April 13th, if a couple of the subcommittees would like to have that day, and then we can work in here, and we know the support that we have here. We have captioning, we have the conference bridge, and at least for those who can travel to town, we would be able to have an in-person, face-to-face subcommittee. Looking at the list, I was thinking subcommittee number 2 is another one that could possibly benefit from some face-to-face time on that day, and certainly any others that would like to have an opportunity to share that day. I would not anticipate it would be a full day. The subcommittees can consider how long they need to work in that environment. Maybe 3 hours, maybe a half day, maybe 2 hours, whatever. But I see certainly subcommittee number 1 has been calling for that, I think. Donna, did you have something to say?
I just wanted to ask, and I'm also on subcommittee number 1. Oh, I'm sorry. Should I go back? Should I repeat myself? Oh, excuse me. So I was just saying that I am also on subcommittee number 1, the pre-NG 911 text to 911 services, and I personally wouldn't be able to be here for a half day. A full day would make it worth it. But would it be possible to have a multi-video conference set up in this room so that we could have a camera on the sign language interpreter and a video of me if there are other deaf people in the room or other deaf people on that meeting? I would much rather do that rather than going through VRS. That would help me to follow what's going on in the room. This is Norm. Sorry.
Norm Williams.
We have an account with Fuse Meeting that we've been using a lot lately that can handle up to about 10 simultaneous video feeds and shared documents and what have you. We could try that and to use it in a function similar to VRI, so we would have a camera dedicated to an interpreter. That would be something we could certainly try here or at Gallaudet.
Tony, did you?
It's a FUZ meeting. FUZ, Fuse Meeting. FUZ. Excuse me, FUZE meeting. And we have an account there that we could use at Gallaudet University. Christian? I'd like to add to that Gallaudet University has a lot of experience using that system. It is worth a try, but I have to let you know that you have to have cooperation from the people who control your computer network in order for it to be successful.
You mean if you brought it here?
Well, the system is, it's an internet-based system, so we don't have to bring it here, but we'd have to make sure that the firewall has specific ports open in order to allow for the traffic for such a conference. This is Norman. Another thing I wanted to add to that, for example, last month we had a block where we couldn't use our VRS app on the FCC Wi-Fi here, so we had to mention it to Henning, who then added that port to an allowed ports list, and now we're able to contact VRS. But we have a new problem. We weren't able to contact it at all. Now we have a black screen, so there are obviously some problems that we get from the firewall here, and it will be important to have a fully open port, a fully open connection for that. And the question is that possible for us here?
This is Cheryl. We could certainly look into that. And I know that during the consideration for the National Broadband Plan, we did have some video conferencing in this room, so I can explore that, and I'll get back with Norm and Christian about what I need to know to ask if we can do that, or maybe just ask Henning. But that certainly is possible, and it would be a good thing for us to do. Norm?
I think we need to give a list of ports, but we also just need to make sure that we're mimicking the home networking experience. Oh, I'm sorry, I was talking again before the camera was on me. I don't think that we need to necessarily give a list of ports that should be opened on the firewall, but we should just be mimicking the home network experience, just an open network here like we're at home, so we don't have to worry about any blocked ports. So I'm not sure. Is that something we can ask for?
We can ask. Cheryl here. We can ask. I'll get with you, and I'll connect with and find out who the appropriate people are for me to talk with here, and then we'll see if we can make it happen. Okay. So is that something that we would like to consider for April 13th? Instead of a full YAC meeting, to have it be a work day for the working groups, and certainly subcommittee working group number 1, and then others, let me know if you want to have part of that day. Mark?
Yeah, we would. Al, yeah, we would take that day as well.
Okay. Okay, good. And
Zal,
then,
yeah.
Okay. Since I'm on the topic of future meetings, I'd like to recommend we skip May and then meet again in person in June, the second Friday in June. Does anybody have a burning need or desire to meet in May? Because we were trying not to have to meet every month this year, and have the working groups be working offline.
So June 8th.
Is that the second? Okay. Sherry?
I wanted to make sure I didn't have any chocolate on my mouth before I got the camera on me. Thank you, Chris.
We're just looking at your hands, Sherry. We're not looking at your mouth.
Okay, thank you. If possible, in June, could we move to the third week in June? I know the first week of June is typically heavy graduation time for high school and college graduations. Well, I guess college graduations are in May. But I know high school graduations in particular are in June, the first week, so maybe we can take that into consideration.
I'll have to check the schedule of the commission meeting room. Is that something that other people would like to consider? All right, I'll check with the schedule and get back to y'all. Richard?
Richard here. And I have a concern. Richard here. I have a concern with the third week of June. That is the week that the NINA meeting is going to be.
That's right.
And I wonder, I think we need to be careful in scheduling. And maybe we can look at maybe the fourth week of June as a possibility. Is that the 22nd? Right. It is the 22nd, June 22nd.
Again, I'll have to check. I have blocked off the second Friday of every month, and so I'll have to check with the schedulers about the availability of other days.
Thank you.
Mark?
Sure. Could I suggest maybe that we skip the June meeting and have the May meeting instead? Okay.
Well, we can't meet the second Friday of May, has been discussed. It's Gallaudet's graduation. So we were going to move it to May 18th. And some conflicts have arisen about May 18th, but we could consider it. My interest is that the working groups work, and if coming together face to face spurs that, then that's good. If coming together takes away from that, then I don't want to do that. So. If the working groups have April, and we have the April 13th for a face-to-face for subcommittees 1 and 2, and then possibly if any other subcommittees want to fill in other hours of that day, let me know as soon as possible, chair people. And then whether we need to meet in May and whether we need to meet in June. Joel, do you have some input?
Yes.
Joel Zev?
Joel Zev, thank you. I fully agree that it's really helpful to have face-to-face meetings, and I would like to suggest that in May we have a control date set for a day meeting, and then any subcommittee that wishes to use that day face-to-face, we may be able to put together a day or not. But if you schedule it ahead of time, and then if subcommittees really want to meet, we can let you know, and that we can use that day. Because I think doing it by phone, conference calls, is really rough, and there's other things happening there, and I'm disappointed with the dynamics of that. So the opportunity of face-to-face would be really helpful.
Norman Williams? Can we get the camera on Norman? We could also suggest May 11th for subcommittee meetings. That may be difficult because Gallaudet graduation is May 11th, and several of us are going to be participating in that ceremony. May 11th. Brian?
Brian Daly. I think I'm on, yes. For myself, May 18th would be problematic. I know we're looking at Fridays, but is it a possibility maybe to look earlier in the week of that ends on the 11th? If the Gallaudet University graduation is on Friday, is it possible to do anything earlier that week or maybe earlier in the week following?
Cheryl here. Anything is possible if I can get the room. We've tried meeting in the large South Conference rooms, and I don't find it satisfactory. Sherry, did you have something? And then Christian? Sherry?
Mm-hmm. If we were to move it to the following week, the 18th of the Wednesday of that week, or the 16th, oh, wait a minute, 17th, 18th, that Tuesday or Wednesday, I would have to get back to D.C. I would have to be back for the National Association of the Deaf Board meeting for that Thursday, Friday, or Friday, Saturday, for that Friday, Saturday. So I could do something for Wednesday, Thursday. Christian?
Christian Vogler?
From a Gallaudet University perspective, the only day that would not work would be the May 11th. But any day prior to that or after that would be fine. Matthew?
Matt Gurr, CTIA. Can I just, I'll put out a suggestion. I think the doodle polls have been very effective at finding a sufficient time for everyone, so maybe instead of, in the interest of time, we should just release a couple of polls on which date works for everyone, and we'll hopefully find consensus on that.
Okay, that's an excellent idea. Thank you, Matt. We'll ask our doodler to help us out, and we'll put together a poll. Thank you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else? If not, we have an opportunity now for public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forth and make comments? Going once? Going twice? Going 3 times? Now.
Yes. We're not going to quit yet. Right. Cheryl here. Yeah, no, I'm not going to let you off the hook this early. No, I got you here in the room. We're going to have to work on something. Give me 1 second. All right, I would suggest that we look to the subcommittees that might benefit or desire to raise a discussion about some of the issues that are important to them. And I'm going to turn immediately to the timeline alignment subcommittee 7 because I have something else to offer. I was reminded at the NINA because you had a column for proceedings, and that's where we had the Department of Justice. This is ANPRM on NG 911 and the FCCs. Well, the Access Board is also updating its 508-255 regulations, and they have real-time text and some other appropriate technology in their proceeding. So I would add that. And since we have everyone here, we might ask if there are others. Maybe there's some standards work going on somewhere. You could, Don or Kevin, if you could explain to the full committee, what we're talking about. What you were developing in the columns, and maybe some other people have some other ideas that are in the process or are about to start or something. Don or Kevin?
Not totally prepared.
I know. You'll do fine.
So I'm...
For the timeline committee, you were addressing what are the different timelines, what
right.
kinds of categories are there.
Right.
And one of them was, regulations and that sort of thing in a column. And I've forgotten exactly the other 2 columns, but the design was to develop the different timelines and categories, and then you would be able to see how they interacted.
Exactly, yeah. So it was standards, deployments, and then regulatory are the 3 timelines that we have discussed so far. That may not be all of them, so we're certainly open to people giving us suggestions for other timelines, and then the work that we will do is to use the source documents from various standards bodies, from NHTSA. Obviously, the NG 911 office has a lot of great documentation, and we'll look at those things to help support our identification of milestones on each of those timelines. And then where we have dependencies between the milestones on different timelines, then we'll be able to slide them around and line them up. So that's really the process that we're going through. Is that what you meant? Okay, great.
Right. Kevin?
Yeah, Kevin Green, Verizon. One area that I don't think we kind of touched on was the area of consumer education. I think we need to add that to the list and come up with some kind of milestones and timelines to get information out to the public related to this issue. So that's one we can add.
Sherry, Farina? Sherry?
Sherry? Should I stand on the table?
Do we have the camera on Sherry, please? There you go. Thank you.
Ooh, going back to what Kevin's comments were. We've got in our report a section related to outreach and education. So when you talk about factoring in what we've already written, or fine-tuning what we've already written, is that what you're going for, Kevin? Fine-tuning what's already been written?
To some extent, but I think what I was going at was I don't think we have specific time frames of when we're going to start communicating with the public about NextGen 911, about interim text solution. I think all that needs to be coordinated.
Very well.
All right. Then we can move down to subcommittee number 6 for the TTY Transition Issues Roadmap. Paul Michaelis, Gunnar, I don't know if you're on yet or not. Are there any issues that you would like to raise for discussion or guidance from the full committee that we haven't already touched on today?
Okay, this is Paul Michaelis. I don't know if Gunnar is on. He was attending a graduation celebration for his son who just received a PhD.
Oh, goodness. Congratulations, Gunnar.
I think we're pretty well covered at this point. One of the issues I would like to discuss eventually has to do with architectures within PSAPs, specifically the notion that agents need to be text-enabled. And what I would like architecturally is to discuss the notion that whatever text protocol is being used out on the PSTN or wherever outside the PSAP, that it come through an appropriate gateway and then just have a single text interface on the agent's desktop. So I would like sometime in the future to discuss the feasibility of that, but that does not need to be done at an upcoming meeting, I don't think.
Cheryl here. Thank you, Paul. I'm going to skip 5 because I don't think there's really anything that the full committee could offer to be helpful at this point. Christian, is that correct, Brian? Or is there? Oh, okay. I'm right. All right. And for subcommittee 4, the completing the detailed report sections, Bob had to leave, and Bruce is not here, and they're doing their work mostly by email at this time. So subcommittee 3, Donna and Chris Littlewood, who are having a sidebar conversation. Donna and Chris, for your subcommittee, the PSAP sign language and other communications assistance, have any issues come up in your work so far that you would like to raise to the full committee for discussion or guidance? I think that you were looking at the recommendations and where to go from there. I mean, I know you all were not prepared to do this, but we could take advantage of us all being in the room. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I really don't have anything to add at this time. We're going to be sending out an email with some diagrams that explains where we think that the subcommittee needs to go, and then look for input from there to build our outline. So it should become a lot more clear, and then everybody is welcome to give their input to make sure that we're all on the same page. So just stay tuned and watch for the emails.
Cheryl here. Thank you, Chris. Well, there's an elephant in the room. Are there other issues that we need to raise and discuss at this time? We do have more time on our day. Matt Gerst.
Matt Gerst, CTIA. So I think the only thing that we really haven't discussed is the actual exhibitions that we saw over the past 2 days. And I would certainly appreciate hearing from some of the members without going into specific detail on any specific solutions or naming any particular vendors, what features among the different solutions appealed to them? What were the things that they liked or had concerns with? And I think having an understanding of that would be helpful for our discussions going forward.
Thank you. Cheryl here, that's an excellent suggestion, Matt. Who would like to go first? I'll tell you one thing that I called serendipity. We did a public notice. We did a public notice asking for exhibitors, and then we announced the time, and then we announced the exhibitors. And the exhibitors had been contacted by me and Ron Cunningham, who's in charge of the Technology Experience Center. And they designated, how much space they would need and what they needed for, Wi-Fi. And one vendor needed an analog line because they wanted to demonstrate one business product. And it was a couple of days before the event. And I'm turning to Christian and Norman and Arnold to kind of wink because I told them this at the end of the exhibition yesterday. I sent out an email to the four who had not yet contacted the Technology Experience Center to designate a location. And so they, Christian followed through and called Ron or connected with Ron, and the best place that was left was right in the middle. And I want to tell you that for a day and a half, it was amazing to watch this exhibition because the vendors were lined up around the room, and right in the middle was the Gallaudet and the RERC. Now, New Star was on the other side of a little column, but they were branched off a little bit, so it really seemed like Gallaudet had the whole middle. I mean, it was awesome for many reasons, because right here in the middle of the room, you had all this signing going on all day long, and the exhibitors were fascinated. Some of them, were not acclimated to being around people who were deaf and who signed, and so this was an amazing experience. We had the NINA folks who came in, and they saw this same thing. And it couldn't have been planned better, frankly. It was an excellent presentation because they had different ways to demonstrate. And I know that the other exhibitors, talked to each other around the room, but certainly interacted with the folks from Gallaudet and the REC, and I just was amazed, and it was just really good. It was really great. So now that I've given you time to think about it, I'll open the floor for other things that was suggested, learned? Mark Fletcher?
Mark Fletcher with Avaya. Again, Cheryl, thank you for putting on that expo and such a wonderful job that you did.
I didn't put it on.
Well, you were a key element.
I tweaked it.
You tweak. Yeah, that's a sign we learned this week. Tweak. I learned.
And interoperability.
There you go.
Right.
I think it was a fantastic opportunity that this happened during 911 Goes to Washington, when you had public safety from all over this country here concentrating on the same thing. And at 911 Goes to Washington, clearly the message was Next Generation 911. How do we make this technology available to save more lives? How do we use this technology to even out the playing field for those with disabilities who are, as someone who was not really aware of this in my face prior to this committee, I am just shocked and ashamed that this has been ignored for so long when we've had the technology to fix it. So my recommendation would be that for next year, 911 Goes to Washington every year, and that the EAC and the FCC and the industry needs to make this a week-long event across all venues to raise awareness to the problem. I know that's a heavy task to fill, but there you go. All right, you've always got a job, but I think it was a fantastic week. I mean, I certainly enjoyed being in D.C. all week.
Al? And then Joel? John Paul?
No, Al was first.
Al? I have to go back because I remember, as Karen, you probably do, when we were with TDI and we introduced a bill to establish a TTY access to 911. And we got a lot of opposition. Do you remember that, Karen? So much resistance. It was like 1980, what was it? 87 maybe? 87, 88?
In the book.
Yeah. And that bill failed. And then the ADA was in progress. And Senator passed the ADA. And at that time, there was no language in there about TTY access. Then it passed the House. And then during the conference committee, if you recall, Karen, right? Who wrote the language for that? Was one morning when it was inserted into the conference report. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. And then that afternoon at 2 o'clock, both the House met and passed the entire package without really looking into the details. And then it became law. And the ADA passed. And people could not find that language, but it is in that package. 67, 68. And I remember that number very well because I had gone to school, the School for the Deaf, which was in between 67 and 68. 67 and 68th streets. So that's how I remember those particular passages. And then Nina, at the beginning, was not familiar with what TTYs were, and now things have changed dramatically. And I've really been pleased to see Nina's excitement about texting issues. So here we sit as a committee talking about SMS and about, for the last 2 days, being seeing the exhibits and seeing all that's happening. And now we've got hearing people who are using text. So it's not just the deaf people, it's the hearing people as well who are texting, which means that deaf people were the ones who taught the hearing people how to live the right way. So, what do you think of that, Karen, as a lesson? Thank you. John Paul? John Paul?
Yep, I'm waiting for the camera. Over here. Hello. Thank you. I was very, very pleased with the exhibits. Yes, you mentioned the one downfall. Actually, there were two. It was warm, if not downright hot at times, and two, it was very cramped. But I think it gave everybody a sense of community by being in a tight space. I have to commend every one of the exhibitors because they all took their time to speak to each one of us, sometimes one-on-one rather than just as a group, talking to a group. And if you came in at the end of a discussion, you missed a whole lot of the introductory remarks. So for that reason, I was very, very pleased. But one thing that struck me was that there were a number of participants, some of whom were ADIS members, who are working with one another. And that is why I come back to that, the idea of a neutral third-party standard, because you would want to be able to have every user being able to at least understand that they're going to get a minimum amount of technology being able to be delivered across the board everywhere. So I was very pleased to see that there was that much synergy between a number of the exhibitors.
Christian? This is Christian here, and I appreciate the comments of the FCC and the exhibitors. They all did a phenomenal job, and on that, I totally agree. Now, I would like to respond to your question, the original question, which was, for me, and several things came to mind during that experience. First of which was, I agree, I was happy to see so many vendors working with standards. I was very happy to see that because the interoperability is important. Secondly, I was also happy to see that there are so many people who are excited about the concept of total conversation, because that's part of the NG 911 that we're presenting. And I'm happy to see so many others looking at it and saying, wow, is that what it's going to look like? So those are all very positive comments and reactions to NG 911 for people who have not had heretofore full access. Thirdly, I was happy to see the industry asking for people's comments and realizing that real-time text is cool. In the past, there was some disappointment that that wasn't part of it, that it was missing. But now we are seeing that we are reminding people that this is an important part and it should be supported. Fourth comment, I noticed that, I teach one class, by the way, and I asked my students to come to the exhibit and to look at the vendors. So two of my students did show up, and I did ask them what they liked and what they didn't like. Two things that came up. One was the possibility of texting to 911, SMS. Second, they love the idea of the user profile being contained within whatever database and having that information forwarded to 911. My understanding is that that doesn't exist now, and that that's not a standard. There is no standard for that. And apparently that is something that is capable of being done, and it is important to some people. It is important to people. So we have to figure out how to make that a standard, and how does that become a fact, a reality. Matt?
Matt Gerst. There we go. Almost. There we go. Matt Gerst with CTIA. So I appreciate all those comments. I'd like to also ask the question that, one of the things I observed was there were a number of approaches to originating a 911 communication. And some of them were downloading an application and then using that application to originate the 911 communication. Some of them just sort of worked within the native software that was on the application. Some of them used different approaches. And I'm wondering, based on your observations, were there any approaches that you preferred? Were there any approaches that you thought, for a community that may not be, or maybe concerned about technological advances and being able to, appreciate and use 911 communication in a comfortable way? Were there any approaches that appealed to you? And the other thing I noticed is that all of the devices that were used to demonstrate the text 911 were all smartphones. And I think we all recognize that the world is quickly moving into this, in the mobile world is quickly moving into a smartphone environment. But we've also heard that there's, a significant amount of the community that may not have access or be concerned about accessing smartphones. So were there any thoughts on, solutions that relied on smartphones versus feature phones or handsets? And I think that would be helpful to know as well. Thank you.
Norm Williams.
Okay, and that's this is a great example of where we see excitement about these options coming up. I'm wondering, Matt, if you have thought about some of the apps would be great tools. I think if they could pass my location and real-time text information, that would be ideal. But some of the challenges are, for many of us, we have apps on our phone. I have maybe 700 apps. So if I have an emergency, remembering to use a particular app may not be the first thing that comes to mind. I would probably rely on the kind of communications that I use on a day-to-day basis. So I think the challenge that we need to really address and find solutions to is, how do we get to that app directly from, how do we get our phone to go directly into emergency mode? I don't know whether it's, some function that I use where I can, talk with friends that I might use on a regular basis, and that has a functionality built in that could allow me to put it into emergency mode. I think it's a safer bet to use what we know and what we use on a daily basis, which at this point is an SMS text-based app. I think there are two vendors that I saw who had great approaches who maybe could work together. One working to support PSAPs who don't adopt their particular system. And then if a PSAP does have internet access, let me back up. The first vendor was great for supporting PSAPs who don't have their particular software system. The other vendor, I think, is great for PSAPs who do have that particular technology in place. Of course, some of the products are not going to work if the PSAP doesn't use that technology or doesn't have network access. So taking those two approaches and applying them, on a broad base to all of the PSAPs would be great. But I don't know that it would be reliable during an emergency. If I'm using an app, again, as a consumer that I haven't used for 2 years because I didn't have an emergency. I have an app called Crime Push, and I thought, oh, right, I forgot about that. It was in my phone somewhere, hidden in a menu, and it's not something that I would use again if I was faced with an emergency. And I also want to add to Norm's point. I agree. Our perspective is special emergency apps are not really the ideal. If an app is available for a user and it's something that they can use on a regular basis to communicate with their friends or with family or with people who they communicate with regularly, and that can then be converted to have an emergency function, that's more, I think that would be a more effective method, because people would be using that particular approach to communicate already on a day-to-day basis. And one example is, in Europe, they have the Reach 112 project. And, that's an example that we could look to. I think total conversation, that concept, requires installing an app. And I guess, how to make that effective is the question that we're trying to solve. If we could add some functionality where the users download the app and they could add certain functions where they could make calls directly to other people using sign language. They could use that app to text. They could use it for audio. And many people were using that kind of app. They would then be using it on a more peer-to-peer basis, on a more regular basis. And they would then be more likely to use that and ready to use it to call Reach 911. Al, were you going to add to this particular thread? I think Brian was ahead of you, and then we'll come back to you.
Brian Daly, thank you. This discussion is very interesting that started with Matt. What we saw, we're in the room were 10 different solutions, and each one were based on, slightly different variations of the same problem, getting text to 911. And that, I'd just like to offer up as one of the challenges we have. One of the vendors that presented stated that they were launching in the state of Indiana this summer with their particular application-based solution. If we get solutions that are going to be different across state PSAP boundary jurisdictions, it's going to be very confusing to consumers and users of those services. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have as we explore this further, and why a standards-based solution that allows for potentially interoperability with multi-vendor solutions on the PSAP side might be important, because each PSAP may choose to go a different route than another PSAP. And there was one vendor, I think that it was Bandwidth, that proposed a solution that did allow that type of interoperability with different solutions, and gave the flexibility in an architecture that didn't lock in a particular vendor solution. It allowed more flexibility in deployments from the different ends of the problem.
Christian, is yours comment in response to Brian? Okay, Christian?
Christian Vogler?
In response to what you said, Brian, that's something that I have actually seen happen. There are some PSAPs who have gone ahead and established their own pilot with a particular app. And I'm concerned about that. And I'm worried that each PSAP is going to end up coming up with their own individual solution and their own individual app. And, my point of view is that that's what's happening now, and that's why we see these, delays in coming up with an interim solution that's based on standards for text to 911, because now there's strong disagreement about how to move forward. And I just think if each individual is left up to their own pilot, that will cause more delays. Al? In addition to the points that Christian has already outlined for avoiding the use of these individual apps, from time to time you also need to update apps. So what if you're in an emergency situation and you're going to use an app that's specifically for emergency purposes, and you find that in the middle of your emergency you haven't updated it and that it's no longer functional unless you do the update. Then you've got to put in a password and give permissions to update it and all of that jazz right in the middle of an emergency, and that is obviously a situation that we don't want to create. Okay, I saw Donna, and also we have a comment over here from Mark. Donna? I just wanted to comment. Several of you had mentioned I just want to add my comments to what some of folks have already said in regard to apps. I understand the concerns that have been laid out, but I'm thinking of people with disabilities who have limited mobility. Also, folks who may have intellectual disabilities. I have 2 friends who want to be able to press a button and have that contact emergency services right away. And I understand because they have significant health issues. I looked at some of the solutions that were offered in the fair, and some of them were very easily accessible and easy to recognize. But I'm thinking for people who have additional disabilities, we also have to consider the ease of use for those individuals. And I also think it's important that we have various means of contacting 911, not just one network or one system. Through a voice network, for example, through a data network. Through other control channels. It's possible to use any of those options, which is great. But that could be very confusing for us if we don't know which one our particular PSAP is using. I travel quite frequently, so I will be using a mobile device, and I may be in an unfamiliar area. So if I try to text my PSAP, does that mean I have to go through each of those individual channels until I find the correct one that gets me a response from my local PSAP? I know when we're talking about down the line with NG 911 that we're looking at integrating all of the potential options. But our challenge right now is that we also need to educate the deaf and hard of hearing community about how those solutions are going to be implemented. You know, for many of us, we don't place voice calls. And so we're not accustomed to doing that. We're used to email, we're used to using other forms of text messaging. So I think that kind of general education is also important. I also wanted to say that I was surprised to see some of the vendors at the fair including location information. I didn't realize that that was possible to do that. And so I'm wondering then, does that require me as a user to have my GPS turned on? And I asked some of the vendors and they said, no, actually, that's not a requirement. So that technology is out there, and I think that's fantastic. It's just another example of the kinds of advancements that we're seeing that will benefit the work that we're doing. There were 2 vendors that I visited, and I'm a little bit still fuzzy on the technology that they're using, so I'll probably get in touch with them directly to get some more information. But I think the exhibit was fantastic. I saw a number of people who were there interacting and getting lots of information. There were some people who I wished could have joined us, but overall I think it was very, very beneficial. Thank you, Donna. Mark? You're on.
Thanks. Mark Fletcher with Avaya. Going back to the applications, we're going down a very, very slippery slope. And Norman brought up Crime Push, which is an application that I happened to purchase and just to look at because I was concerned about claims that were being made about the application. And if I report a fire in this room right now and go to report this, what I get back is, thank you for using Crime Push. Please notice this report is not currently set up to be received by your local police. Would you like to call 911? Now, I would have hated to have to spend 99 cents and find out a month or two later that this does absolutely nothing. So as we look at applications, there's a technical issue there because we cannot do data from this device directly to the PSAP. There's no mechanism to transport that data. One way of getting that is through an application. But now you have a very specific proprietary application that may work in one area, may not work in another area, or, as in this case, doesn't work at all. And I think that needs to be brought up and discussed.
And Joel?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Okay, thank you. I've been speaking on a lot of points that are a little different. I think the demonstration yesterday was really excellent. My concern is, and I think Norman put his finger on it, that people need to be able to contact 911 through the system they're comfortable using, that they have experience with, that they use every day, so that their skills don't become stale when you introduce a new app, and then in an emergency, in a panic situation, you immediately forget all the things you've learned, and you revert back to basic skills, and if those basic skills aren't there, you have nothing left. I was concerned that most of the systems yesterday rely on relay. Essentially, it's not a direct communication between the caller and the PSAP, but it's direct communication to some sort of system that manages, modifies, changes, alters the signal to go to a PSAP. And we're not really recognizing what the goal is of this group, has been mentioned many times, is direct communication between a caller and a PSAP operator to get 911 services. Most of the services yesterday were relay services. And they might be called a different name, they might have a different configuration, but they're essentially relay. Mike?
Joel, I just need to make sure you clarify that you're talking about it's not telecommunications relay services.
I'm talking about it's a communication between somebody.
Relaying, gateway.
Right.
Right.
It's a gateway.
I had to
thank
explain
you.
that several times within the FCC.
Thank you for clarifying that. It's not telecommunication relay, video relay. Right. It's a gateway between you, something, and a local PSAP. And a lot of us have talked about that. My concern, though, are there many generations of us who were not born with computers in their hands and do not have access to cell phone technology the way we around this table are used to. That they don't type readily into a computer, a touchpad, a smartphone. I asked yesterday, I carry two phones. One is a dumb one, which I use because it's cheap, and the second is an iPad, which I only use when I can go on the web because I can't afford the $40 a month for all the other services. I don't really need them. Most people are carrying these among the elderly community. And if you look at what the AARP is distributing and some others, the Jitterbug, other very, very simple technology, that's what people are going to be introduced to. Those are not smartphones. Those cannot do SMX. They cannot do all the SMS. They cannot do that kind of communication. But the vast majority of our potential constituency are not members of the organized deaf community that has been using this over the last 10, 15, 20 years and has become incredibly sophisticated in this. There are people who are 50 years old, who are 60 years old, who are aging out of this, who have become deaf. They do not sign. They do not have access to these associations. They are deaf, frequently homebound, because they're afraid of leaving their house because they can't communicate effectively with anyone. We have to really look at this the constituency also. It's the larger constituency. It's the broader base constituency of the elderly, the emerging elderly that are coming through the post-war era, who are now coming into their 60s. And those people are the ones that we should also be developing strategies for 911. I'm concerned that we may be missing them if we're not looking at other alternatives other than technology that people are super comfortable with. The second population, in 64 and 65, there were significant rubella epidemics in the United States. And the result of those epidemics was a huge bubble of people who are deaf who are now in their late 40s. A huge number of those people did not go to school, did not learn to read and write, do not have reading skills and writing skills that allow them to use a TTY. They don't even use TTYs. That's another constituency that we need to look at. And finally, the deaf-blind community. In that 64 and 65 epidemic, there was a large proportion of people who are now deaf and blind who did not have an opportunity to learn to read and write and do not know Braille. Less than 10% of the blind community read Braille. So we're always thinking in terms of Braille readers and coming out with all these things, but the vast majority of people, A, do not use cell phones, smartphones, do not read Braille, do not read and write. I think this is a good discussion because I think I like to keep that group on the table also as to we're supposed to be reaching out to them and thinking in terms of them for NG 911. They still have heart attacks. They still have diabetic shock. They still have all the things that all of us have, and they need to be able to do this also. I apologize for speaking so long. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So, Jean-Paul? Jean-Paul?
Thank you. Am I on? Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Donna, you made me smile. Because when you said that you were unaware of the positioning of where you are because you don't have your GPS, that's because of standards. And those are because of the Emergency Services Interconnection Forum, which is one of our committees at Addis. And yes, I'm proud of that committee. Because a lot of the emergency services first responders and the user community belong to that group and have made significant strides in working with the FCC in ensuring that we can get closer and closer and closer to the coordinates of where an emergency is happening. So it happens not by happenstance, not because there's not by happenstance. It doesn't happen by happenstance. And it's not because there are 3 or 4 or 6 or a dozen vendors that can provide that kind of service. It's because there are those vendors, those subject matter experts that have gotten together in a room and come up with a baseline, neutral, third-party standard that then all of those groups, no matter what phone you buy, you will be connected to a cell tower, and that cell tower will then take you to where you are making your phone call from. It doesn't send you home if you're visiting I'm a native of Maryland. If I go to Florida, to Disney World, and I have some kind of catastrophic occurrence, that I can, but just by my phone, by making a 911 call, they understand I'm not in Maryland. They understand that I am at a cell site, and that cell site happens to be in Orlando.
Okay, and Matt, and then Christian. So, Matt?
Excuse me, Matt Gerst, CTIA. So if I could probably summarize the 2 points that I think we've heard in this discussion that came out of the exhibition was, one, I think I hear that the use of native services to the device and not potential applications is preferable. And considering the ease of use for a wide range of end users, whether they have high technical skill or low technical skill, needs to be considered. And I think these are very important points, and I think it's very helpful, and I think something that we all learned from this exhibition. And I hope that in the subcommittee going forward, we can take these features that we'd like to see in a text-based communication solution to 911, and others that we all may have thoughts about, and weigh them and try to come up with some recommendation that, as close as we can, meets all of the criteria and the features that we'd like to see in this type of a solution. So I'm very encouraged by this discussion. I hope that we can continue it in the subcommittee going forward. Thanks.
Great. Christian.
Christian Vogler?
Okay. I think you're right. I'd like to add a third point onto your summary, Matt, that most users will want the native communication functions. That is certainly true. But there are going to be a subset of users who use apps for their everyday communications. So we want to make sure that we include all of the basic principles and the basic functionality into what people are using every day, which relates to what Joel has mentioned. I mean, I think that it's wonderful that we can emphasize the diversity of the different users and the different ways that they communicate with each other. We absolutely have to respect that. As earlier, I forgot to make a point that I was hoping to about smartphones. Strongly, the hard of hearing community does not use smartphones overwhelmingly. And the reason is that it's so difficult to find a smartphone or any phone that is hearing aid compatible. So we find often that hard of hearing people are upgrading their phones, but then these new phones, the smartphones, the trendy phones, do not work with their hearing aids. So hard of hearing users are preferring more simplistic phones because they're hearing aid compatible. Back to Matt.
Thanks. So Matt Gerst with CTIA. So Christian, I just want to quickly follow up on your comments. One is I hope that you're encouraging those who are looking for accessible wireless handsets to go to CTIA's website, accesswireless.org, where they can actually search for smartphones and handsets based on their accessibility features. And one of them is their hearing aid compatibility. Obviously, they need to find those phones that work with their hearing aid devices. But hopefully we're encouraging more people to search for phones that meet their needs. The other question I just want to follow up with you on this discussion where you say, well, some people do use apps as their everyday communication service, and some people may not. So how do we strike that balance? How would we find a solution that relies sort of, or that can bridge the gap between those who use smartphones and may rely on apps and those who rely on services that are native to a device or on a low-end feature phone that don't have the capabilities of a smartphone? And I don't think there's an easy answer. I think it's just something that we need to continue discussing.
Arnaud, and then we'll go to Donna after Arnaud.
There is one thing that pops up in my mind every time when people talk about apps. When is it exactly an app on a smartphone and when is it part of the operating system? Because sometimes I'm looking at the apps I'm having, but there's also one app, it's just the telephone functionality everybody's using to make a voice call. But it's actually also an app. But everybody's using it every day, so they don't think it as an app, but just as the phone functionality. And I think it's a very good thing. What we'd like to see is, well, now we download as an app, that will become part of the operating system of the phone to be a normal functionality, the telephone itself. That is what we are going to hope for. And I have also another remark. I really enjoyed my time to demonstrate total conversation and real-time text. And it was nice to be in the middle of the room, so I could all see what the other people were doing. I talked with a lot of you as well. And I'm very glad that I came by plane from the Netherlands to be there. So it was a lot of effort, but absolutely worth it. So thank you for that.
Donna? Oh, I'm sorry. Christian wants to respond, and then we will go over to Donna.
Christian?
Okay. In response to what Matt said about apps and native functionality, what I see that has to happen, the flexibility of apps has to also support the native communication functionality of any phone. So, for example, if I send an SMS message to 911, and that's supported by the native functionality of my phone, when I have an app that also sends SMS messages, that app should be able to provide the same functionality as the native function of that phone.
Brian Daly.
So, Ryan?
Yes, thank you. This is getting more deeper into technical issues, which definitely we need to address within the subcommittee. But one of the challenges, Christian, with your last statement is, while the native functionality is something that is provided by the service provider's network, native SMS, for example, the applications themselves run on the IP network, and even if that application supported what appears to be an SMS function, it may not be true SMS. It may be an IP application completely independent and separate from the service provider's SMS, not even running on the service provider's network, going to some third-party server on the internet, and completely transparent to the underlying native services. So while I appreciate the desire for having a common set of services across apps and native devices, that certainly raises complications because of the way applications are downloaded independently of service provider native functions.
Patrick?
Patrick Donovan?
Oh, there we go.
Patrick.
One quick point that I wanted to make. My bureau, the Public Safety Homeland Security Bureau, we're currently looking into, and this group may be able to inform us on it, is we've heard that not all handsets are capable of using 911 as an SMS shortcode. And we haven't received a clear answer on that or not. So one thing we're looking into, and would be helpful if this group could provide us with further information on, is if that is the case, that not all handsets are capable of using 911 as a shortcode. What are those specific handsets, and how do we go about working this out?
A short code for text?
For SMS text to 911.
Brian and Norm?
Brian? And then we'll go to you, Norm.
Brian Daly, yes, that is one of the problems that has been reported and observed. If you look at valid shortcodes for SMS today, 3-digit shortcodes are not supported in the standards. And that's one of the challenges, that there are devices and device manufacturers that have developed per standard and recognize a 3-digit shortcode is an invalid shortcode and just do not let you originate messages to 3-digit shortcodes. They reject that. Whether there's a comprehensive list, I don't know if the industry, and maybe Matt has information, have done a complete analysis of how many devices or what the impact is, but certainly that is a true statement. Those do exist out there because the standards are written such that 3-digit shortcodes are not a valid shortcode today.
Thank you.
We have done testing using different shortcodes on different phones. Some phones will throw an error of insufficient digits. So, for example, Android phones. If you put in 3 digits and the send button is just not active, or you may get a pop-up that says this is insufficient digits, you need 5 or more digits. It's not a network issue. In that case, it's the SMS client that needs to be fixed. And the iPhone, testing on the iPhone recently has shown the ability to send through a 3-digit short code via the operating system, but it is then, in that case, the network which is rejecting it because the network isn't able to parse those 3 digits. Which is interesting when we talk about IP-based SMS clients. If you look at an app called TextFree, which is an app for iPad, it doesn't have native SMS, but I can communicate with friends who use SMS through using this app on my iPad. It does not support short codes because it's IP-based. It doesn't have any connection with the carriers in order to make that connection. The IP-based SMS client requires 10 digits or more. Nothing less than that. And the IP-based SMS client will, like I said, will not support a 911 because it's less than 10 digits. There are 2 possible solutions. One is an SMS client could remap 911 into a valid code. Another possibility for that is that the network can remap that 911 into another valid code. And perhaps we could also support a second short code, 911-911, which is now 6 digits. If that is a workaround for people who haven't updated or upgraded their phones. I know a lot of people have not updated the software on their phones since they've received them. So maybe if they were updated, that would solve the short code issue. But for those who aren't updating, we may want to have a stopgap measure, like a workaround for that, so we could use 911-911. And let's go to Matt.
Matt Gerst, CTI. Norman, do you have any of those summaries in writing? I mean, is there a way that you could circulate those findings to the broader EAC committee? I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I could do that. Sure. I don't have it in a written format. It's just based on our testing, but it's been informal.
I think it'd be helpful as the subcommittee's going through their processes to maybe incorporate some of that information into whatever end product they develop. Thank you.
Okay, and Donna, I think that you had something. Donna, did you want to? I think you had your hand up, and we skipped over you and went to a few other folks. I wanted to check in and see if you wanted to say anything. Sure, and because it was a while ago when we were talking about hearing aid compatibility, it's not quite in the same vein, but there are nonprofit agencies, there are audiologists, there are stores that sell equipment that help people with hearing loss communicate. With accessibility, whether it be for phones, doorbells, or alarms, assistive listening devices, and so forth. There are entities that sell those things. And I was recently talking with someone who's a manager at one of those stores, and he expressed to me that hearing aid compatible phones are just really limited right now. And the FCC really needs to encourage companies to upgrade their technology. Now, this is just the understanding that I was given from my conversation. Now, as recently as last week, my agency, which has an advocacy program for deaf and hard of hearing people, I learned from my boss the other week that lots of hard of hearing folks are using text. We've seen them going more and more to text over using the traditional phone functions. Cheryl?
Cheryl here. Donna, on the hearing aid compatibility issue, that is supposed to have been fixed. So if you find people who are having trouble with that, please encourage them to file a complaint with the FCC so that we can identify manufacturers and models that are not living up to our requirements, because the requirements are pretty broad. Matt, did you have something to add?
Yeah, this is Matt. I just wanted to add to that to Cheryl's point, the FCC has specific rules on hearing aid compatibility of wireless handsets. And certain handsets are required to meet certain standards that have been adopted by the wireless industry and then also adopted by the FCC in order to ensure that those handsets are compatible with hearing aid devices. The issue that we've seen, though, is that there are, as far as we know, no standards for the hearing aid devices themselves. So it would be interesting to see if the concern is that there's some compatibility issues on the handset side or on the hearing aid device side. I don't think that's been clearly identified yet.
Right. And Cheryl here, further, Donna. If a manufacturer is only making one phone, they may not have to comply with the hearing aid compatibility rules. So it depends on the model and the company. And again, so if they would file a complaint with us, then we can help identify those that are not working, not a hearing aid compatibility, and then we can further inform the public about that kind of issue. So thank you. Somebody had something else?
Christian? Christian
Vogler.
I want to talk a little bit more about that point. At Gallaudet University, our Technology Access Program, TAP, has done some pretty extensive research on the hearing aid compatibility issue. And first, CTIA has done a wonderful job on their webpage of providing a lot of useful information.
I'm just trying to bring Donna's attention back to what Christian is saying because he's furthering the conversation on the hearing aid compatibility.
Oh, sorry. So sorry, I'll start over. Gallaudet University has done a lot of work looking at this issue in depth, particularly in my program. And first of all, I'd like to say CTIA has done an excellent job on this issue with developing a webpage that has really detailed information about hearing aid compatibility. And Matt is correct. The problem is also with the hearing aids as well on the hearing aid side. There's RF immunity, which is what we're dealing with right now. Some hearing aids are more sensitive to interference. And often it can be very, very difficult to get detailed information from the hearing aid manufacturers. The hearing aid manufacturers have been generally silent on this issue, and most consumers don't understand the issue because it's very technical and gets very complex very quickly. We also see some interference from the displays of these cell phones themselves. Sometimes if you bring your cell phone to your ear, it automatically darkens the display, and that's designed as a feature. And we encourage more designers to include that because that can minimize the interference when people are trying to interface with their hearing aid and the cell phone. So there are a variety of steps that you can take to make sure that happens. First, you want to make sure that you do your homework on your phones and your hearing aid to make sure that they are compatible specifically. And the second step is to go to the store and actually test your hearing aid with phones. That's a step that you just can't avoid. Okay, Michaelis, I think Paul Michaelis, who had your hand raised on the phone. I'm so sorry. I think that you were trying to get in here.
Yes, this is Paul Michaelis. This comment is a bit out of sequence, going back to when I first raised my hand. But two different issues have come up in our discussions having to do with PSAP agents being ill-prepared to communicate appropriately with folks with disabilities, and similarly people with disabilities not knowing how to communicate with a PSAP when an emergency arises. I was wondering if we could make a recommendation that PSAPs implement a non-emergency inbound mechanism such that people with disabilities can practice calling into a PSAP for a pretend emergency just for practice, and similarly give the PSAP agents practice communicating with the folks with disabilities. Is that a reasonable recommendation for us to be making as part of the EAAC?
This is Cheryl. Paul, would you repeat that question that we were asked to respond to?
Yes, I'm sorry. What I was suggesting is that we provide a recommendation that PSAPs, the 911 contact centers, open up a non-emergency inbound mechanism so that people with disabilities can get practice communicating with the PSAP, and also give the PSAP agents practice communicating with folks who have disabilities. This would address two of the concerns that we've had in previous meetings. Number one, that people with disabilities might not be able to confirm prior to an emergency that the mechanism they would use would work. And number two, allowing the PSAP agents to gain some experience communicating with folks with disabilities.
Christopher?
Chris Littlewood.
And then Chris Littlewood.
And then Norm. Chris Littlewood, there you go.
This is Chris Littlewood. Am I on? Okay. I agree with that statement. I think the recommendation would be that we request that PSAPs collaborate and conduct community outreach to encourage communities and people with disabilities to connect with their public safety in their own area. I definitely think this is a training issue on both sides. In Florida, I have several instances where people that are deaf or hard of hearing have called the police department to try to do this exactly, and if they were using video phones or caption phones or whatever the case may be, and the police department didn't understand what was happening with the communication assistance, and they got hung up on. I had one individual tell me they got hung up on 10 times in 1 hour. And these are not isolated cases. They're happening quite a bit. And I know one of the things Cheryl is going to say is encourage those people to make a complaint. And I do that. But I think both the PSAPs, telecommunicators, dispatchers need more training in understanding what happens when people are using some type of communication assistance, whether it be VRS or people that use captioned telephones. And then I also think that a lot of people in the disability community are ignorant as far as what's going to happen when they make that call, whether it be to 911 or to a non-emergency. So it's collaboration between the two, the community and the PSAP. So I would second the recommendation that we encourage collaboration between the two for training and outreach.
Okay, we will go to Norman and then Donna, and then we'll come back to Al. And I think Donna's taking off. Okay. In the technical committee last fall, we had a section that talked about test calls. I'm talking specifically about texting only, not about voice calls. For text calls, and we had users send their first message. Say the name of what?
The bridge won't know who's speaking.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Norman. This is Norman Williams speaking. Sorry. In the technical committee, we had written a section, I think it's T4.3, about test calls for text communication. If the person sends a message with test as the first word, the server will respond with some message. So we have a test call. We're encouraging people to do that, so that we can make sure that there is a system that folks who are traveling, for example, can send a text message to ensure that the system is functioning. For voice calls, it's a little more complicated. I'm not sure exactly how we can test that. We had a hand over on this side. Was it?
This is Cheryl. Let me jump in here too to respond. Back when Chris was speaking, the PSAPs are not under the jurisdiction of the FCC, so any complaint would be filed with the Department of Justice. That's one issue. And the second issue is that we have on the EAC 2 members of NINA's Accessibility Committee, and I think that we can certainly look to them to help us develop some strategy to work on this testing and cooperation and collaboration with the PSAPs. Go ahead, whoever's next.
Yeah.
I think we'll go to Joel.
Al?
Oh, I'm sorry, Al. Where? Go ahead, Joel.
Years ago, New York City was, I believe, one of the first jurisdictions to be found not in compliance by Department of Justice to 911 direct access. And during that period of time, I was named by the courts to monitor their access and the quality of the response time. What we found out in testing calls was that the training of PSAP operators gets very stale very quickly, if not used routinely. And there's just not enough calls coming in using those systems to keep people sharp. And frequently when you walk into the center, you see the TTY in a corner somewhere and not readily accessible, or that people have now, the TTY will come right up on their computer screen, but they have no idea what's coming up because they don't use it every day. And that the ability to keep 2 parts, one, the caller, the constituent, knowing how to call 911, and the receiver, the PSAP operator, knowing what to do when they get a call from 911, that gets stale. And it's a real challenge for all of us on both sides of the net, how to keep both the sender, the constituent, and the receiver sharp to when that does happen, when you do need to make that call, people are responding in an accurate, effective way. That's hard, and that's what we're losing. It's not about initial training. It's ongoing practice, and just like fire drills. You need to have people skilled in doing it, and when something happens, don't hang up. It's a relay call or whatever.
And Al. This is Al. This is Al speaking. We talked about outreach and working with 2 groups, both the PSAPs and the disability community. When we say the disability community, I squirm a little bit just at the use of that term, because I feel that there are different groups of people with disabilities under that. Deafness is certainly one of those groups. There are also hearing people with disabilities, and often we can get confused when we use general terms about the disability community. I think that we should use more specific, targeted ideas, and I don't want to sound segregationist, but I do think that we need to make sure that we're talking about distinct groups, and then we can feel more comfortable asking questions. Those folks are more comfortable within their own groups and asking questions among their peers about specific issues relevant to them. Christopher?
Okay, I appreciate that comment. The reason I appreciate that comment, and the reason I chose the words the disability community is to be inclusive and not distinctive, because whether it is somebody that is hard of hearing, late deaf, or very involved in deaf culture and using ASL from birth, or has some other type of disability that is not related to hearing loss, I think everyone should in some way be related to communicating with the PSAP, and they should know how to do that. And so that's why I made that comment.
And Brian?
Thank you. Yes, there we go. Thank you, Brian Daly. And I'm just going to deviate slightly from the discussion, which has been very good. Cheryl, the April 13th meeting, as you can see here, I think we have more than a few hours of discussion, and I would like to ask if perhaps we can have the majority of that day dedicated for sub-working group 1 to explore many of these issues. And also based on this discussion, I think Matt requested Norman to bring something in writing. I would encourage that the more we can get circulated ahead of time in writing on the email list, the more time we will have to think about and deliberate further when we come back together on the 13th of April. And we will continue to have our sub-working group 1 call next Wednesday. And work towards that face-to-face meeting where we can put an agenda together to, continue this excellent discussion and hopefully start documenting some of the points being made. Thank you.
You ready to go? Yes. This is Cheryl. Unless there are any burning, continuing questions, we can escape a little early today. Thank you all very much. I have gotten a CD of pictures of the exhibition fair. I have 111 pictures. So I'm going to be sending them out. Yes, Chris?
I did have one last burning comment. I was so sad to find that I had conflicts that prevented me from being here yesterday. If there is anybody that did any videoing of what happened yesterday, I would certainly love to see that. And if any links can be shared to that effect, I would really appreciate that. I know there's a lot of people around the country that would like to see that as well.
Cheryl here. Yeah, as I said, I just got it at the lunch break, and I've reviewed it, and it is very good. I mean, the pictures, you can see the exhibitors, and you can see a lot of the participants, and many of us will recognize the difference. And so I'll try to get them out. And a short video was shot, but it didn't encompass me probably more than 15 minutes. Joe?
Just a suggestion. Hello? Just a suggestion. Yesterday, many people couldn't come who are a member of VIAC, and so I was able to be there, but by the time I got there, many of the vendors were out of material. They had they expected got much more people, many more people than they thought they'd get. Could it be possible for you to drop them a note and see if we can get a binder together of their handout material that we can send to all the EAC at one time? I think it would be great for people who were able to be there, but also those who were not. I was very, very impressed by the range and learned a lot of new things there. But I think that might be very, very helpful for us. I'm sure they'll be happy to do that.
I think so too. Thank you, Joel. Cheryl here. Anything else? Travel safely. Have a great weekend. And we'll be in touch.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you on
Goodbye.
the bridge.
Goodbye, Cheryl.
Bye. And thank you again to our wonderful interpreters. Yay, interpreters. Yay, interpreters.